Welcome to the Calumet Roundtable. I'm your host, Tom Roach. I'm joined today by my guest, Dr. Rob Hallock. Rob has a PhD from Birmingham University, and he studied behavioral neuroscience, and he's done postdoctoral work at the University of Colorado, and he's currently an assistant professor at Purdue University Northwest in psychology. Rob has the unique experience of having a golden touch when it comes to getting published. So this interview is for those of you that are struggling to get your academic articles published or to get your articles published in the popular press maybe even. I think we're going to get some interesting tips from him, and we're also going to find out about some unusual things that he's written about. So Rob, welcome to the show today.
Thanks very much, Tom.
It's good to have you here. You've gotten some unusual things published in unusual places. One of the ones that I wanted to ask you about was the Mushroom magazine. Tell me a little bit about that. How did that come about, and what was that like?
That's a good story. When I was in graduate school, I was pursuing a PhD in behavioral neuroscience, and as a hobby, I was very much into collecting wild mushrooms and eating them for food. And one weekend, I realized that I was the only neuroscientist who liked mushrooms. And I had an idea of combining the two things.
See, that amazes me, because I would think a neuroscientist would be especially careful about eating mushrooms and might not want to eat them at all. But you were confident.
Yes. After learning many things, yes.
You've heard the urban myths about people who invite their friends over for some mushrooms they picked, and then the next day they're all...
More than myth.
Yes. Okay. All right, so go ahead. Tell us about your adventure.
I was specializing in studying taste and smell in the laboratory. So I was just wondering, what do mushrooms taste like? So I decided to write a paper on it. And that got published in a trade magazine for mushroomers. And that was my first publication in the mushroom field. And it was a good article.
Yeah. Do they ask you for more, they send mushrooms to you to taste for them and tell them if they're safe or anything?
Well, after gaining more knowledge in mushrooms, I was eventually on the Poison Control Center list for experts to call when someone has accidentally consumed something potentially poisonous to idea for them.
Yeah, okay. Well, so let's look at the academic publications. If you're a faculty member at a university, you may be in a unique situation where you have to publish in order to keep your job. The old expression is publish or perish. And a lot of people have perished over the years. Tell us a little bit about how you come up with an idea for one of your articles, let's say.
So my mindset, to start off with, my mindset is to have some low-risk things that have a fairly good certainty to get published, and some high-risk things that have a much less likelihood to get published. So I'm working on things at the same time. So I have a constant stream of perhaps safe articles that are going out, working on side projects too, but perhaps some higher risk things on the side that may eventually pan out and get more press perhaps.
So give me an example of a safe one.
So the safe ones I try to tackle are like learning aids, novel ways of teaching things that I can submit to a teaching journal.
Okay, for instance. Actually, I published one of those for a public speaking class, but what do you
So for my neuroscience class, I came up with a set of goggles, and I worked on this with two students who are co-authors on the paper. So we have a set of goggles that mimic the perceptual qualities of various eye disorders. There's a pair of glasses that mimic cataracts and a pair of glasses that mimic glaucoma. So it's an easy thing that teachers can do to make the diseases more concrete.
Oh, very good. And what about one of the more risky topics?
The riskier ones might be synonymous with the more long-term projects that might take a couple of years to complete, as opposed to the eyeglasses thing, which can be done in a weekend. But like studying the the effect of concussions on one's ability to smell. And that's a longer-term project.
Probably less demand for that one.
Well, with the popular movies that have gone out about the health consequences of concussions, it would be a hot topic if it's published, but it'll take a while.
You know, I heard something about that. Maybe you can tell me if this is correct or not. So someone explained to me that the nerves that are connected to the nose that bring the sensation of smell they go pass through the skull, and that if the head is jarred, they break off.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Your brain floats around in fluid, and it can move around a little bit in response to a mild head injury. But the nerves that go from your nasal cavity to your brain do pass through tiny little holes in the skull, and the brain moves around a little bit, but the nerves just stretch, and when they stretch, they sever, and then one can no longer smell. And something like 2/3 of people who have been in bad car accidents lose their sense of smell.
Really? Yeah. I heard boxers can't smell. If you decide to become a boxer, you lose your sense of smell.
That's right. The joke in the class, of course, there's no laughing matter, but boxers smell bad.
Yeah. Okay.
Smell poorly.
Yeah. Good. You know, I hope people know that before they go into it.
And it's not just boxing; it's any context.
Well, NFL quarterbacks, I wonder. You know,
even,
NFL quarterbacks. Yeah.
Even high school football or college football.
Really? Yeah.
There are consequences.
Yeah. Well, people should know they're taking that risk. So, did that article get published?
No.
It didn't.
Well, it's not finished yet, but longer-term project. Yeah. Working on it.
Okay. Good. Maybe the NFL will give you a grant for that. They're trying to redeem themselves, I think. So these articles that you publish, they kind of fall into a couple categories, I think, right? So you've got drug? I think one of them you mentioned earlier was drug surgery research, right?
Right. So one line of research, and I for many of the research projects I tackle, I try and think of things that students can see to completion in a year or the semester or 2 semesters. Yeah. And it's very simple to administer a survey to a larger body of students, and there are a lot of interesting questions that one can think of for drug use.
One of these will be of particular interest to students. I think it was use of non-prescription drugs as study aids.
That's right.
How did that topic come about? Suggested by a student, perhaps?
It was actually, so we were doing a drug survey on the use of hallucinogens. And one question out of 100 had to do with the use of non-prescribed prescription drugs, or the non-medical use of prescribed drugs. Yeah. And we saw that like 40% of the people in the survey had used these drugs without a prescription, or not as medically directed. Right. Then we did a whole study on it. And
I'm just curious. I mean, it's like take LSD and then go study for the test? Is that what we're talking about here?
People don't do that, but people do take Ritalin.
It would explain some of the answers I've been getting, but that's okay.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But people do take Ritalin to allow them to pull all-nighters.
I see.
But I can assure you that there's actually a negative correlation between how many stimulants a student takes and their actual performance on the test.
Right.
The more taken, lower grade.
Well, what about these, products like Red Bull and things like that? Can you endorse them?
Absolutely
Maybe we can get some money donated here. No? Too bad. All right. What happens? What do you know about that?
It's just a lot of caffeine, stimulant, bad consequences. It doesn't necessarily help memory or anything. It's just keeping someone awake.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that should at least get published in the college newspaper, if nowhere else. So, and what did you say happened to that one? That was.
That got published in a really good journal, Drug and Alcohol Dependence.
Oh, okay.
With 2 students.
Very good.
2 undergraduates, yeah.
And so these students get published while they're still undergraduates. What good does this do them? How does that help them?
I know that it helps them get interviews for graduate school, and it helps them. And I know that it's the first topic that comes up in their grad school interviews. Like, tell me about this project, and the interviewer wants to know that they were involved with the research. They want to hear about it. They want them to speak about it, and I don't know if it helps them get the actual positions or into graduate school, but it helps them get the interviews.
Right. From what I understand, it's a little bit harder to get into graduate school in psychology than in some other areas, right?
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps extremely hard, right? And so they actually expect students to have publications in some cases, is that right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So when you were a student, did you have a faculty member who encouraged you or worked with you to get published? Or?
Not when I was an undergraduate, but I had an excellent advisor and mentor in graduate school.
Yeah.
Who taught me the ropes of publishing, and I continue teaching that to students as much as I can.
So if you're going into academia, this is really it's not like you go into this to teach or because you're just interested in a topic. I mean, really part of your job, at least in your field and in some others, is to be published on a regular basis, right? How do you feel about that? I mean,
I take it as a given for my field. I understand why it's necessary. Fortunately, I love writing. I would struggle if I didn't love writing.
Yeah.
And I love working with students, motivated students on projects to see to completion, and
yeah,
I enjoy it.
So do you keep track of your citations?
I get an email every time one of my articles is cited.
That's great. I remember when I was working on my PhD, one of the faculty members found out that he was the most cited person in the department, and he was, it went to his head a little bit, I think. But is there an official scorecard on those things? Does that get considered when you're up for tenure?
What does get considered is the impact of the journals and how many publications. I know I've had a publication that got cited twice, and I was one of the people who cited it. So not
you
everything.
cited your own publication.
I did.
Yeah, that's good.
But not everything I work on is high impact or gets a lot of traction.
Yeah. Yeah, I cited my dissertation in an article I did once, and nobody caught it. And then actually my dissertation cited an underground newspaper that I worked on in the late 60s. So I was really cheating the system a little bit there, but it was fun. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and the Calumet Roundtable will be right back with Dr. Rob Hallock. Welcome back to the Calumet Roundtable. I'm your host, Tom Roach. My guest today is Rob Hallock, Dr. Rob Hallock. And Rob has a rather large publishing footprint for somebody who's only finished his postdoctoral work about 7 years ago. And so we're talking to him about what he knows about this and seeing what we can learn to help other people who are also interested and needful of getting published. Speaking of your footprint here, sometimes this branches out into other areas and other ways. One of the pieces that Rob published was on otters, I believe, right?
Yes.
And tell us about what that was about.
I was teaching a class at Skidmore College in upstate New York, and the title of the class was Pheromones and Animal Behavior. And the students had to work in small groups on review papers where they had to pick a topic and really delve into it. And one of the papers looked at animals that can't smell underwater, find food underwater. And there's a lot of animals that do that. And there's one a little section on otters.
I just thought you could smell underwater. I thought sharks could smell blood, right?
Sharks can. Like manatees can't smell underwater. Some whales can't smell underwater.
Interesting.
Dolphins can't smell
Okay,
underwater.
okay. Not everybody can smell underwater.
Not everything smells
Okay,
underwater,
right.
but they still have to find food underwater, and they would usually find food via their sense of smell. So I published this paper with a couple of students, and I got in a really good biological journal, and I got an email yesterday.
Well, wait. You piqued my curiosity. How do the otters find their food? I have to know.
So some animals use echolocation to find like moving targets.
Oh, okay.
And there's this technique that a number of mammals use where they go underwater and they blow out a little air bubble of their nose onto a rock or something. And then they breathe the air bubble back in, and then they can detect the chemicals in it.
Oh, yeah, that's
So
interesting.
otters do that.
Okay, they're smarter than they look.
I guess so.
I never would have thought of that.
Me
yeah.
neither.
Okay, so then this branched into something else. So then you got a phone call.
So,
yeah.
so fast forward, I got an email from BBC yesterday, and we're having an interview tomorrow, and they're going to pick my brain about otters and the bubble technique in general.
Right, and so they're just interested in otters. They're not interested in neuroscience.
They are just interested in a specific species of otter for a documentary they're doing.
Yeah. Did you tell them, hey, you got the wrong guy when they called you, or did you?
I can
kind of know what they wanted.
I can tell them anything they want to know about smell and the bubble technique, but
Yeah.
I've never worked with an otter.
Yeah, right. Okay. I want to just make this a little more broad for a minute here. When you're looking to generate ideas, I'd like to know, what you look for. What kinds of things do you explore? What makes you think there might be something of interest? And I bring this up because you've really covered what seems like a broad range of things here. I mean, if your area is neuroscience, I see how this is all connected. Sure. But you've been very creative at looking at ways to connect it, and you've sort of gotten into different markets here, if you will, in terms of these publications. So talk to us a little bit about that process.
So all of my ideas start off with questions. And all these papers started off with a single question. Why does that behavior happen? Why does this animal do that? And one thing I noticed when people were drinking wine, this was just a casual observation, is that many people clear their nasal cavity before they sniffed a wine. And I was wondering if that did anything. Does that increase their olfactory sensitivity?
Yeah. Now, I don't remember seeing anyone do this. I've been to some wine tastings, but in other words, they'll sort of turn away from the wine and go, and then they'll come back and smell the wine.
I've seen them blow out of their nose before sniffing the wine.
Yeah, okay.
And I was wondering if it did anything. And so I conducted an experiment to test the hypothesis. I sat down with a student. We designed an experiment to go through the process. And then we got a nice publication in the esteemed Journal of Wine Studies.
Amazing. And what did you find?
It doesn't do anything.
It doesn't. But you proved that it doesn't do anything.
Exactly. Some evidence that it doesn't do anything. And
did you work with professional wine tasters or?
No, we worked with undergraduate students, and they weren't smelling wines. They were smelling. We used a standardized test of olfaction, so they smelled different things. But we measured their thresholds and sensitivity, and found that there was no change.
I see. So is this something that had to be approved by a board? And all
sure.
of that because you're dealing with
All
students,
experiments and people have to be approved by a board.
Even though you're just asking them to smell.
To make sure we're not doing anything unethical.
Or serving them wine if they're underage, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's the generating ideas part of this. You also have three kind of criteria that you look for here, right? You think that it's important to have a knowledge base of experimental designs. You also think that the researcher needs to be excited about what they're doing, and it's also useful to have a co-author who has a record of being published. So let's talk about those three items here. So the first one, a knowledge base of experimental designs. Tell us what that is.
Right. In order to test any hypothesis, one has to be broadly familiar with designing experiments, and that's something we teach students in some introductory psychology classes.
Yes.
Or certainly one would get it in some introductory biology or whatever field-specific course one might be interested in.
For example?
So in psychology, we teach research methods, so we talk all about the design and how many people should be in an experiment.
So what are the design factors of the wine experiment, let's say, the smelling experiment?
Well, in general, for statistics, one should have like 30 people in a study.
Okay.
So, and you don't want to keep the participant for too long, so we would limit the study to like 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
We don't have, I think we may have paid the participants like $5 a person.
Yeah. See, if you'd actually had them drinking wine, you might not have had to pay
Exactly.
them. Yeah, they'd be lining up, especially if it was good wine. Okay, so that's the knowledge base of experimental designs. Now, then this other area about being excited about what you're doing.
Right.
So you got excited about the otters?
Well, I was excited about the technique that multiple animals that were unrelated to each other were using.
Yeah.
And obviously, they're using it because it's advantageous.
Yeah.
So
that's actually pretty interesting. I think people who are watching who complain that they see the same stuff all the time on the news. This is why you go to college, right? You read about things like this, and if you want to pick up some of these journals, you'll find out all kinds of things that you never saw on TV, right?
Right.
Even on Channel 11. But if you're paying attention to the BBC, you're going to find out about this, I guess, right?
Somehow, yeah.
Yeah. At
But
least,
yeah,
at least the otter experiment.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I tell my students is if they're not excited about something, whether it's a paper or a presentation or anything, like no one else will be.
Yeah.
So they have to have something they're excited about for some reason.
Yeah.
And
But most of us can't imagine an excited scientist. That seems like an oxymoron, Maybe in a Far Side cartoon or something, but yeah. But I'm working with that. Mm-hmm. And then you said having co-authors who have a publication record. How does that work?
What I meant by that is you have to know the ropes, and you know the ropes by learning the ropes, by working and getting a number of publications or being mentored by someone.
I guess I had a similar experience with that. My mentor, when I was working on my PhD, was one of the more published people in the field that I was in, and he co-authored a couple articles with me, and it was fairly easy because I had nothing to do with it. He was publishing the articles, and my name was on there. And I suppose if I was smart, I would have tried to parlay that into something else, but I moved into other directions. How about in your case? What was your first article like? How did that work?
As you probably know, the first article, you do a lot of work, and the person you're working under as your name, like as perhaps the last author on a publication.
Yeah.
I try to get my students as involved in the publishing process as much as possible, and to show them, to walk them through the steps and what's going to happen next and how long it's going to take, and so they get a good feel of it, so they're not going into graduate school as clueless as us.
And there's some other options that you know of, like self-publishing, going into trade magazines. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for the average person who's excited about something and feels like they have something to share with the broader audience, the place to start is possibly trade journals and write something up for a trade journal. And if it's a bigger idea, one can self-publish a book through Amazon, and a lot of people reach big audiences that way.
Mm-hmm. In academia, does that count for anything?
I did self-publish a book. I don't know that it counts for anything in academia.
In terms of getting promoted.
In terms of getting promoted, right. But I learned the ropes of publishing, and now I have a book agent and an idea, and we're sending out to publishers now. And I think self-publishing a book helped me reach that goal.
Yeah.
And if I get that book published, then yes, that would help with tenure and such.
And what's this concept about having a platform to work from?
So any author of a book needs a platform. They need an audience. And it's easy to get an audience today with social media. And just for example, if one has a platform of like 50,000 people,
Yeah.
easily get a book deal, I think. But
Right, well, let's go through the details on this. Okay, so give me an example of something that might have maybe you built a platform on one of these topics.
well, any expert in whatever field might have Twitter followers, and that's an audience they can reach who are potential customers of a book.
Yeah.
Or being in charge of a Facebook group for something informative or some kind of product.
So let's say one of the topics that you've written about, is there something that one of them that's got an online following of some kind?
Well, one of my
mushrooms maybe, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I do have a page set up for mushroom enthusiasts, and it has several thousand members. And
Okay. So let's say I decide to get into mushrooms and I study them and I'm putting up pictures and I'm eating them and describing my hallucinations and things like that. And I've got 50,000 followers, then a book publisher will take note of that and be more likely to want to deal with me.
That's right. And I'm not saying it has to be 50,000 people. It's like on the upper limit,
But that shows them that there's actually an audience out there. It's an
Exactly.
interesting phenomenon because 20 years ago, there was no such option. You had to go in and say, I think people might be interested in this. And convince them
and a
they're
publisher
interested.
won't take someone on if they don't think they can sell books. And if the author, the potential author, has some kind of platform to reach people, they're much more likely to take them on. And even publishing in the trade journal, that's reaching an audience of a certain size, and the publisher wants to know that.
And so you can use the trade journal publication then to parlay into the academic publication in some cases.
Yep.
Okay. Well, very good. That's all the time we have for our program today. Thank you again to Rob for coming on, and the Calumet Roundtable will be back with another guest next week, and I hope everybody has a great day.